What up, random rockers? Which I feel like might be the last time I say that. So, anyways, without further ado, finally, we're going to get to the music. I've been delaying it for too long. It was a lot tougher than expected. I mean, there was a lot to process, and yet, when it comes to certain portions of my list, I still feel it's not right, except for maybe the top part. But at least in that, I know I'm confident that I'm good. So, here we go, guys. We're going to start with honorable mentions. I will probably not have them in the description, but if you're willing to look it up, just pause video, I guess, and just Google it, I guess. Most likely, if you at least have a PC by that point, or that's best I can recommend given my own current circumstances of things. So, here we go, guys. At as honorable mentions, without necessarily particular order. Yeah, Blink 182's 9. No, technically it should be 8, but they're counting Buddha, I guess, so 9 it is. But either way, this is better than initially expected going into it, even with Blame on the Youth being whatever. There are decent enough tracks here, and for what it is, it's fine. It's not as bad as y'all think, and well, in fact, it's kind of somewhat better than what most people tell you, despite Anthony Fantino. But honorable mention is as good as I'm going to get it, because I understand the divisiveness, and it does kind of, that portion does weigh on me a little bit with it, but not enough to not give it that honorable mention. The same with the band that I did kind of talk a little bit about in a weird way when I first started finally uploading YouTube. Torch, their follow-up to Restarter, Admissions. It's mostly there because technically it does have its moments of getting monotonous in places, despite, the title track and the final track being really solid and completely different most of them. And I think On the Wire, it does have a very current Alice in Chains in a good way, like Black Gives Way to Blue kind of way. Or at least what worked on that record, and stuff like that, as I had stated before, and plus submissions just makes you want to submit. But anyway, with the way those riffs come in and how they chose to crush you in its ending, Silverstone Pickups, surprisingly better than expected, but not quite, I guess, like better than Better Nature. But at this point, I could kind of see how they would come off as having run out of ideas. At this point, it's still good for what it is, but I'm not expecting too much going into the next album if they ever do one. But it's still solid for what it is. King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard, Infest the Rat's Nest. Not too much to say that most people haven't already said, but yeah, it's a solid album. Most people don't talk about this band. Car Bomb, Mordial. Kind of was a recommendation, more so or less through Lucas LeCompte, shout out. Order in Decline with Sum 41. Of course, Ultra Bridge, Walk the Skies, pretty good. It's a step up as far as I'm concerned from The Last Hero, personally, to me, in terms of just album as a whole feel. Don't know if I consider it better than AB3, but I can tell you Fortress is still one of my top tier album from them. Die on Mars by, if I can remember, sadly, by the Callous Buddha Boys. They're fine. Yes, and I'm giving this honorable mention. I don't care what most of y'all say. Beautiful Birthing, Buddha, by Issues. I hate when my brain does have brain farts like that. Gary Clark. Some of it having seen, I am mad that it's not up higher, and most people, and that Crush didn't even put it on his honorable mentions. I don't know if that has something to do with it, with a certain someone putting it on his worst of list, and I still disagree with that wholeheartedly. But yeah, it does have its issues where closer around the end, but it's still a fun record regardless. For the majority of it, even if it's as long-winded as it is, but it's still fun, and probably my closest thing to hip-hop in terms of my jurisdiction you're going to get from me. And the only Christian band that I did bother to actually give enough of a listen to, in fact, to a point of a lot with a double album. And I was actually considering putting on this list, and I had to fight this for my number 15. And that's, you guessed it, Demon Hunter's War and Peace, which I had to tie it with that. But slightly more on Peace, because War, you could tell they could make a full-on heavy record anyway. But Peace being able to do the more melodic, more softer, more hard rock driven side, to be able to pull it off as a full album is still worth warranting. And I do have a soft spot for it. I wanted to put them more on the list out of the soft spot, but I couldn't really use my bias on them, given that, you know, it had to be around my birthday when they finally... And I'm proud of that one the most, given that it actually got noticed by the band, Demon Hunter, and that's about as big band as I got in terms of people involved, in terms of people liked my stuff. I don't know if they even subscribe. Do they? Subscription thing don't tell me. But anyway, which if you do, thanks. Thanks, Demon Hunter. That, or you can just at least know how to have a good PR rep for at least some of your fans, and or at least those fellow reviewers that know that you make solid stuff and are one of the few Christian bands to do it. And at least I have something to talk about with them, as opposed to, well, we got to Skillet and kind of Switchfoot, which I'm still kind of mad about that. Might get into a rant later when I get to a certain other album, but before that, we now start, done with honorable mentions, starting number 15. Despite its mixing, Baroness Golden Grey. I loved this thing, but man, just, yeah, this mixing is an issue, and I want it to be up so much higher, actually. I know it's that good of an album. It's just, if they fix the mix, and that's part of the reason why I'm afraid to even bother to put it in, buy it, you know? And they're still a good, solid band, even with everything. And this is where our number 14 comes in. It's just fun to talk about, and just knowing that this is a guy that's been, that even back in his Husker Du days, yes, talking about him, Bob Mould's Sunshine Rock. The album title speaks for itself. Definitely very, feel a nice little pep in your step kind of a thing. Something one other band needed to bring back that I was tempted to put as an honorable mention out of spite, which, like I said, was the Switchfoot album. Speaking of that, and a band that, at least within their first track, you could kind of understand that sort of comparison Crash had made, but honestly, I feel it's more closer to a lot of alt pop, but in a way that feels like what I would have liked to have gotten out of Switchfoot as a proper follow-up instead of what we did get, even though that record is closer to a Switchfoot record than any of those other people. And that is the band Comedos Try Hard, and it's an EP of all things, too. Or at least it's claimed an EP, even though some people are considering it an album. But yeah, I mean, even though I was a little late to having listened to it, finally it's nice to have a good pop rock that despite being more in the modern context, actually put in more of an emphasis on rock, which you don't see enough of. And I think because of that, it's not getting the traction and the radio airplay it probably does deserve. Here's a band that I know doesn't get radio airplay, but probably should, and I would actually recommend in terms of a band that has a, dare I say, a Van Halen-ish feeling to them in terms of how they deliver their stuff, even though it's not exactly that, per se, or at least what worked about them back in the day, pre-Van Halen 3, I guess. Or at least more David Lee Roth days, still had its moments with Sammy. But yeah, this band is more of a progressive alt metal, and it's more probably closer to a Carnival thing and all those things. And I'm talking about Moontooth's album Crux. Initially, I kind of dismissed this and wasn't even going to put it on here. But yeah, it's really good. It's actually pretty good, and I actually upon giving it another listen, and enough that I wanted to put it on here and have it be that kind of recommendation. And there's just a lot of fun. And something to the singer's vocals. I'm trying to figure out where I might have heard that it was kind of vocals before somewhere, but I can't think of where. I mean, there's some moments that are very, maybe closer to Greg Picciotto's moments on more digestible stuff that he started doing around Ironworks with like Milk Lizard, or even moments like the chorus in One of Us Killer kind of a thing. But other than that, I'm trying to figure out where else. Maybe it is Carnival and I just don't know, but can't figure it out for some reason. But But it's freaking solid, and it's done very well here, and it's very tasteful, and definitely very for a more alt proggy type band. It's definitely far more closer into that radio friendlier territory and an almost Chevelle kind of, but better than. Microwave, Death is a Warm Blanket. It's something very Alice in Chains, sort of Nirvana grunge about this record, and it's a post-hardcore band of all things too. It's they really knew what just tracks like float to the top, and like especially Mirrors just has something to the way they do the riffs on those things, and that's really good, and it definitely has a haunting feel to it, a dark haunting feel to it for what it is, and almost post-apocalyptic in its nature, I guess, from the way its design is. Jimmy World Surviving. I'll admit, looking back, their last record was a little bit, I guess you could say, as just for what that surprise of an album was, it is a little bit better, but what I did like that did keep me invested in that record, I got a lot of, which was within Pass the Baby, the latter half of Pass the Baby, and to Get It Right, which that actually helped make Get It Right a much better song than when I initially first heard it. But this album, I mean, the closest thing to finally having something on the lines of the title track to Bleed American, and even more so, even lyrically, Criminal Energy off this thing. The title track's pretty good. You already get an ease in, but Criminal Energy is where you start to really get going, and then it just kind of just goes through, get some good stuff within delivery. 555 is whatever. 1 Mil is where it's at mostly, and just All the Way Stay is really good, and you didn't expect it, the sax, Bruce Springsteen-y saxophone type of thing to work, but it does. Holy moly. And then we have at number, and that was at number 10. I forgot my numbers on those, but anyways. Self-titled from Astronoid. Number 9. I like this. This is a fun, chill type of band. They're a band that initially I was going to dismiss, but it's just having to come back to it. It just hits so much harder better than expected, and it's just something fun. And I almost feel like I could probably make this a good gateway for other, even though it's somehow considered post-black metal and black and shoegaze. It's not even really that. It's more closer to just being more of this combination of and molding of ideas that come from post-metal and sort of melodic metalcore with some progressive, with some alt prog tinge. Prog almost more lenient into the more progressive pop rock sort of tinge. But for the most part, I would say better chill, the terms that Crash Thompson used for this album, chill metal. I would even go as far as to just say maybe just atmospheric or ambient metal. Even though the metal part can be somewhat questionable and be more considered as rock. But yeah, this is a solid release regardless. And it does get to a point where it seems like it's kind of monotonous by the point of Breathe, but Breathe works for what it is as that kind of chill thing. And yes, the vocals do come off very Circa Survive, Circa Survive Anthony Green in its approach. If you liked, and this other band that kind of ripped off Circa Survive, that was sort of kind of lumped into Christian bands. But anyways, yeah, it helped having to get the physical copy and listening to it that way as opposed to the 7 extra minutes that we really didn't need, especially with Mocking Beat. It's this version. It's this version. It's this version. It's how you are to properly listen to it. Even with the one interlude that is on this record. And if it had charged the thing, I mean, look at this thing. It's really nice. I need to charge it yet, but totally worth it. Totally worth that. Just don't bother with the other stuff. Anyway, excuse me. But there were and you know how I feel. I want to have it higher, because it's Tool, damn it. But other albums had to happen. Other things happened on this release that came out this year that just still stuck with, that came out before this album had come out. Hell, literally in a couple weeks beforehand. And one of those albums that I wanted to go back to more, or at least knew that in quality it was a better release. Surprisingly, in the sense that it did what it said it would do, and it actually delivered. And that's Slipknot's We Are Not Your Kind. And it made me realize, even going back into the discography after listening to this the first time, I should have been a maggot long ago. Because I've always liked Slipknot, but I've never really bothered with their albums, and it took this one for me to finally do it. And I feel awful not having done so. And I'm almost half tempted to say it's better than Iowa. I'm half tempted to say that. It's debatable, sure. But it probably will age better and more gracefully than Iowa, that's for sure. Even with the experimentations, even with the one track that shouldn't have been on there, that name of that track escapes me, but compared to All Out, which All Out Life should have been... Heck, just having All Out Life on there, at least even having it as the closer, would have made it an even better would have made it like they would have kind of done it with the bonus track for Japs, dang it, which we didn't get here as stateside. But yeah, that was good that was good regardless. But there were some other albums that I found a little, in fact, especially one that I sort of anticipated but wasn't expecting too much out of because of a certain third solo effort that was different, but more in the sense that it was more like Beck than anything else. That album, my friends, The Return of a Raconteurs, Help a Stranger. I got a lot out of this thing. Just sure, Live a Lie is probably the only thing lyrically annoying on this thing, but not enough to... And you'd think that should be enough that I should bump it and probably put that there instead. But it didn't. But sonically, it was still enough fun that it got me through it. And I could just, at every other track that followed, even Thoughts and Prayers for what it was a pretty good closer as well. And all the tracks leading up to before we got to the singles, and eventually even within the context of the album, Sunday Driver is a much better song. And I understand some people putting it pretty high on their list for 2019. And more of this, Jack. More of what you did here. Basically, the magic note thing you needed truly was Brendan Benson. If you were going to go back to that, you needed him and the rest of your boys to help back up your own thought process, because just yours alone, despite going in some better directions, it didn't pan out as well. This was the answer that we needed that last Jack White album didn't do. And that his other project was never going to do for me, because it just didn't feel like what I got out of White Stripes or this band. And this band coming back, which is the only thing where we're going to get closest to White Stripes reunion ever. This is what we needed. Which was number 5, by the way. Number 6, Devin Townsend's Empath. I never thought that this follow-up would be so great. I am a little leery, and even with having a Devin Townsend thing, sure, the second disc, Test of Manhood, does feel like B-sides in comparison to the B-sides you did get off of Transcendence, which Transcendence did grow on me even more, so despite the opening thing. But this record, just as a whole, is just a fun experience. And overall, and there's so much going on, it might be a lot for some people, but it's still really, really, really good. Really, really good for what it is, and it played a part in what would eventually be my top 2 albums of the year, because I really did consider this even in the top 3, but there's some more simpler and yet more effective records that wound up beating this thing. That being... Pup's Morbid Stuff. I've liked Pup, their last record, which name escapes me, don't get me wrong. But yeah, that thing, this had hit me hard, closure, despite what most people would say about that track. It's hard. Full Blown Meltdown is a great rager. And and it does lose itself a little bit in this tail end, but it's still not enough to keep you out of interest, especially after how crazy Full Blown Meltdown was. But it's still it's solid. This album is solid. It's good. Probably one of the better pop punkier records out there that does lean a little more post hardcore. With Warm Blanket, more of a grungier post hardcore, but lyrically I could actually get into that as well, and that's something that's really can be said for that album as well. But there were like 3 other albums that were just better. Puppy, The Goat, this UK band that it's essentially, you've probably seen my review on it. I liked this thing. Please go check it out. It's really, really good. Please. It's still really good, despite what some people will say in terms of its production. I still like it. Vengeance, I like even more than what I initially did before. Vengeance, freaking Entombed are just good riffs you want to figure out how to learn on guitar. And even though I'm a bass player, but there are some jet switches where Just Like You is nice to have around. That's some good bass there too. Even the Feeling Evil's nice little change in vocals, and even adding female vocals on top of it for the chorus, where it's back and forth, drag it out. There's just a lot of fun to that thing. But the top 2, Thank You Scientists, Terraformer. Oh shit. Now you can see it better. Wrinkle. I mean, anything I haven't already said in my swim, has been said. But yeah, despite what everyone else is putting it on honorable mentions, or not even on anything on their lists at all, and I feel like that's, except for like maybe notes, reviews, and I think it's bull. This record is very solid. Eventually, I will, down the line, deep dive into their discography, but I was just too obsessed with this thing to give those albums a chance, and maybe eventually I will down the road, especially once they come up with a new record, whenever that's going to be, because apparently they take a long while till they can release something. Not to mention, they change members a lot, with the exception of their guitarist and their singer, who sounds like the dude from Coheed and Cambria if he took more lessons from Michael Jackson as opposed to Geddy Lee. With minus certain isms that usually are associated with Michael Jackson, to at least take those out. Not as rough around the edges, and at least the ability to hold a really good note, or at least in the sense of a more R&B kind of a thing. I mean, by the point of Life of Vermin, things do slightly dip, but it still keeps within its own groove. You and still invested even up to the end, where Terraformer just is where it's real rocker in it. It's definitely one a guitar player should definitely get into. Though good luck finding the kind of, I'm guessing you're going to need a slide kind of guitar, or some kind of steel fretboard kind of guitar, which is what he uses. Like, seriously, check out the lead singer's video. I don't know if I'll leave a link in the description or in the comment section or whatever, but yeah, this thing just... And also, this and the follow-up record have one thing in common: Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers alternate OST. You will do. I've said enough, but there was just one album that even though technically I should put this at number 1, because I did go back to it a lot more than the other, but technically there's just a song on here, so many songs on here, but it's a shorter length. It is long-winded, but it hooks you in its groove and it makes it fun. And if you're on a road trip, it's definitely an album you'll want to hear and continue to listen to. But there's one album isn't super long, does what this kind of happens to do, goes a little bit more J-pop rock, or power pop in and of itself, and its album's Well Placed a Boat on the Sea. Oh, go away, Mom. Or Dad. This album is so good. just off of Captain Awkward alone. It makes you just sit down and just go, all right. Even when, and what you understand that being the first single, given they were a comedy, one of your internet-style comedy bands, starting out and kind of more along the lines of metal before becoming what it is. Trash Thompson ain't kidding. This thing. It gets you before you even know it sometimes. And it's, I mean, from tracks, even the Phantom Limb thing, like, a lot of them are just very, even to the point of being good anime openers or something. Like, it'll hit you there, it'll hit you when you're playing any Nintendo game, more so a Smash Brothers game, and so on and so forth. But this thing is just, it's amazing. And you don't have to always fully take my word for it, but you can just watch it. Or listen to it, I had screwed there. But anyways, and that's my list for the year, and that's it. What did you think? What was your best of the year? And this is the last of Random Rock and Roll Wrestling Reviews. Or at least what is Random Rock and Roll Wrestling Reviews. What do you guys think? Leave a comment below, let me know. And as always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking. I'll see you in the next video in a different way. Take care, y'all.